Good morning, good morning. We are live. I never know because it's always all over the place, isn't it? It doesn't really tell you. But hello, good morning. I'm not in the room that I thought I would be in this morning. I'm not in the place that I thought I would be in this morning. But here we are. We are ready for Burnoutology Live, our Monday session. So good morning. Thank you for joining. If you are joining me live, let's get the notes on, shall we? If you are joining me live, let's get comments on. This is the usual faff when we get live stuff, isn't it? It's everything because you can't do any of this stuff in advance. Where's the comments? There we go. There we go. So if you're there, let me know you're there. Say hi, say good morning. Let me know where you are from, where you're joining me from. I had somebody join last week whilst they were on holiday. They didn't chat, but I got a lovely message from them afterwards. So I was watching from my sun lounger. So that was very lovely. If you're on a sun lounger, please switch off. Watch the replay later. Enjoy your summer. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me. So let's start with this, shall we? If you think that burnout is just stress, just too much stress, then you're already off track. Literally already off track. I hear this constantly, right? Coaches, leaders, HR, even medical professionals that use the term stress and burnout interchangeably. But the problem is they're not the same. This is why I'm not in my room. If that becomes too much, let me know. I've got builders, I've got floorboards all ripped up, I've got pipes being pulled up out of the floor, I've got all sorts going on. But yeah, let me know. So as I said, so I hear these terms, right? Stress and burnout being used interchangeably. I also, we're not going to cover this in a huge amount of detail. Well, probably not going to cover it in any detail today, but I also hear burnout and mental health being used interchangeably as though it's the same thing. Burnout and mental health are not the same thing. Today, we're talking about burnout and stress, not the same thing. And this is where, sorry, I've got all sorts pinging up all over my screen. This is very irritating. Okay, let's go. So a lot of this interchange language, right, this interchangeable language comes from people that I see just reciting the World Health Organization definition about burnout and just reciting the 12 stages of burnout and thinking that this tells you all that you need to know about burnout. And yet the World Health Organization definition and the 12 stages are like this much, right? The tip of the iceberg when it comes to burnout. And yet so many of us like don't miss that because we think that that gives us all the stuff. Now I see there are 3, sometimes 4 times a year that I see like all coaches apparently become experts in burnout awareness. And they're sharing articles in Forbes and Harvard Business Review, and they've got blogs and they've got posts and they've got all sorts going on, right? Everybody, every coach, not every coach, lots of coaches seemingly become burnout experts a few times a year. And that's usually just before the summer. They all start talking about this is why you need to take a break, right? This is burnout. Here's the 12 stages of burnout. Here's the World Health Organization definition. And what they're giving you are tools and tips and techniques about why you need to switch off, why you need to break. And they're giving you time management techniques. They're not giving you anything that's going to be any value when it comes to ending burnout. So we see that in the summer. We then see it this time of year, right? September, as kind of, kids go back to school, or, not even just we've got kids going back to school, right? September for lots of us, particularly for me, it's my birthday month. And September for me always brings that kind of new school vibe energy. It's the start of a brand new 12 months for me. But again, we see the same coaches that are then giving burnout tips that aren't burnout tips at all. They're time management tips. We see them happening. And then we see them kind of in the run up around December. This is what you need to be doing around the new year. And then sometimes we see them in the new year as well. So 3 or 4 times a year, I see lots and lots of experts talking about burnout. And what they're giving is time management techniques, not giving anything about it. So if you do not understand the difference between time management, stress, and burnout, this session today is for you. So today, I'm going to break this down, right? I'll show you the 3 critical differences between stress and burnout. I'm going to talk to you about the signs to look out for. And most importantly, I'm going to talk to you about why every ethical coach, ethical being the key word there, must stop treating burnout as if it is stress. So by the end of today's live, by the end of this session, I want you to know exactly why the two get confused, how to tell them apart, and what this means for you as a coach. I'm being told you can't all see the comments. There we go. Luke says, I hate it in January when coaches become experts on January blues, which has been proven that it doesn't exist, right? We just like, and it's I kind of get it. As coaches, particularly this year, right? Coaching it's been a really tough market for people. We've definitely seen more people turning to ChatGPT, thinking that they can use that as coaches, realizing actually that they can't. Social media algorithms, right? I know that my reach has been like 10 times less, more than 10 times less than it has been this year compared to previous other years. I know that the word burnout is getting limited on every single social media platform, right? It's been a tough year out there for coaches. So when we do start putting this stuff out there, right, when we start trying to be experts in trends or time of year stuff, of course we're doing it because it's part of our marketing, right? We need people, we need to keep talking about topics that people might be struggling with so that we can then find more of the business. Totally get that. But I think, yeah, as Luke says there, so many people don't know what they're talking about. They maybe write a blog, maybe ChatGPT is now currently writing them a blog, or whatever other AI tool they might be using to get them to write a blog to position themselves as an expert when actually they don't know what it is that they're talking about. And I do get a real bee in my bonnet when it comes to this, specifically around burnout, because I know the harm that is being done and the potential harm that can be done when this all goes wrong. And not only do I know it from my own lived experience and from the more than 700 leaders that I have coached through this individually, but I also know for lots of individuals and some coaches, when they come to me, they have done training with other providers that has not helped them go to where they go, or they have coached with other coaches whilst they have been on the brink of burnout or coming through it, and it hasn't helped. There's been more harm done. Now, I know that I am not, I know I'm not the cheapest. I'm not here to compete with anybody on price. Absolutely not. And so I think for some people, if somebody's coming across seemingly, they look like they've got, the same credentials, they look like they've got the same training, they're talking about the same stuff that I am. And I see my stuff repeated all over social platforms. I've seen some of my tools that I have created, right? Some of the resources that I have created with other people's brands on them as their tool to be able to help people. I see my stuff regurgitated all of the time, and people trying to then position themselves as the experts using my content, but clearly not being able to deliver. This stuff does damage. And this is why I get so passionate about this stuff. Luke also says the idea of using ChatGPT as a therapist is mad to me. No one considers security risks. It is this, but also, and I don't know if you've tried it, Luke. So I definitely, I'm brilliant at writing, right? I'm brilliant at writing, and I can talk about this stuff. I was going to say until next Christmas. I can keep talking about this stuff forever. What I'm awful at, really awful at, is sometimes a lot of clarity. And so sometimes my emails can be really, really long. Sessions like this, I lose my thread. I go off on a complete tangent and talking about stuff. So where ChatGPT has been really useful for me is I can say, right, this is the email that I want to send. Here's my email. Like, what's my email title? Or what's my hook? Like, this is the video that I want to do. This is what I want to be talking about. What's the title of this video? I've used it for that stuff. I've had many, many conversations with ChatGPT about what it knows about burnout. And I can tell you again, if you're using this stuff, I have caught it out so many times, giving me misinformation. And not even always just about burnout. Sometimes it's giving me misinformation about me. I asked it the other week, maybe a little bit, not just the other week, but a while ago. I needed a short bio for a talk. And again, I'm like, how do I fit like this much bio into 3 lines? So I put my bio into it. Like, how do I make this like more concise and impactful for this particular talk that I'm doing? Right. Because I thought this is maybe where it can start to help me. And it told me within this bio that I had done an additional TEDx talk that relates to nothing that I do. And it gave me a book title for a book that I've never written. I was like, where did you get that from? Well, I thought it sounded good based on what you've done. I've then questioned it on burnout. I've questioned it on coaching. I've questioned it on like, what is the difference? What are the limitations of people if they're coming to you for burnout information or burnout coaching? And it's admitting to me constantly that it's not giving the right information. And I keep challenging and pushing back. And then I get this, oh, yes, sorry, you are right. Thanks very much for the pushback on that. But unless we know whether to push back, but I know that people are using it as therapy. And, we're seeing now news reports about how people have been using it for therapy and they've gone on to do harm to themselves or to others based on the information that has been providing them. We saw in the news, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, about a teenage boy who had used it, and it had guided him and supported him in how to. Sorry, I've got other stuff going now. Just it's a really important point, but how to go through with a successful suicide. It's not a safe tool. But I do think we are seeing people using it for personal coaching, for therapy, for people using it. Now, again, I hadn't until a couple of weeks ago. We're going totally off message here, aren't we? But I do think this is an important thing to talk about. A couple of weeks ago, I don't talk to it. I type in, or I'm copy and pasting documents, right? Just kind of tweet this, give me a title for this, do this stuff. A couple of weeks ago, I was out walking the dog. And again, whilst I'm kind of waiting for my operation in a couple of weeks, even just walking the dog has been really, really difficult for me. But I was out walking the dog and I had this idea. And I did for the very first time talk my thought into ChatGPT. I was gobsmacked at the, dare I say, humanness in which it responded back to me in terms of conversation. So how it spoke to me was very different to how it responds in writing form. And so if people are using it for that, if people are talking into it, again, like talking, process is a different part of our brain from kind of typing. But if people are talking into it and then getting that talked response back, I can see why so many people are relying on it for that. But it's not a safe thing to do. So as I said, I get that. That was probably my 10-minute tangent. This is where we can go, right? This is where we can go. Right, let's get ourselves back on track. So today, we're going to talk about 3 critical differences between stress and burnout, the signs to look out for, and why every ethical, and again, this is the word for me of the day, every ethical coach must stop treating burnout as if it's just stress. So hopefully by the end of this live, I'm going to talk really quickly to make sure that we are done on time. But hopefully by the end of this live, you will know exactly why the two get confused, how to tell them apart, and what that means for you and how you coach. So before we dive in, I want to know, when you just pop this in the comments for me, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of burnout? Right, it's no right or wrong answer. Just give me your gut reaction. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think of burnout? So whether you're watching this live or on replay, I want you to type that in the chat for me. I will respond to this even after this call is done. So if you think about burnout, what's the first word that comes to mind? Go with gut instinct. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of context, right? So the World Health Organization, this is where I started, isn't it? The World Health Organization definition of burnout is chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. Right, the World Health Organization definition of burnout is chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. So that sounds quite neat, doesn't it? Gives it quite a nice little title, puts it into a nice little box. But the issue with that is that definition alone just reduces burnout to bad stress management. And as I said a few moments ago, right, I know from personal experience and from coaching over 700 leaders through burnout that it's not it. Now, there are 3 different types of burnout. Covered these on some different sessions. You'll find more in Burnout 101, but there are 3 different types of burnout. And yes, one of them can be caused by workload. But let's talk about these differences. So stress, it really, right? Stress is pressure. Burnout is collapse. Burnout is literally nervous system shutdown. I talk about it as like a burnout being like an overloaded extension lead, right? If we needed a kind of way of looking at it, and I hate matches. Again, I'm going to make this really clear. If anybody is using matches to describe burnout, really, really irritates me. And it irritates me because if I lit a match right now, it would be absolutely useless once it's been lit. As people, we're not useless after burnout. We can rebuild. So I prefer, if we need an analogy, if we need an image to kind of think about, if we need an analogy, I want you to think about like an overloaded extension socket. So if you had an overloaded extension socket, right, you've got your laptop plugged into it, you've got your phone, you've got your headphones, you've got your iPad, you've got whatever else you might need plugged into it, right? You've got your TV, you've got your Sky, you've got your router, everything is plugged into this one extension socket. Starts to get warm, you start to ignore it. You might put something in. Maybe you've got 2 extension sockets running off each other and you've got even more that's kind of going into it, right? And then we get to the point that extension lead becomes, it fries, or it might blow a fuse somewhere in the house. Now, what we might need to do is just change one fuse, or we might need to rewire the whole house, depending on how much load was put into it, how long it had been loaded for, how big is the blowout, right? How big was the burnout? That's how I kind of want us to think about it, right? So if we need analogies or images or any of that sort of stuff, I want you to think about like an overloaded extension socket, not a match. Matches are absolutely useless. Can't reuse them. As people, we're not useless. We just need we need rebuilding. So maybe we need a fuse changing, maybe we need completely rewiring, but we can be repaired and we can come back really bloody brilliantly after burnout. Okay, so I want you to kind of stop at that point. So stress is pressure, burnout is collapse. So here's the story, right? Years and years ago, my first burnout, 2013, I was told by some very well-meaning friends who started to see that whilst I was, and again, this is the thing with burnout, it looks like you're coping brilliantly. But because I was spinning so many plates, juggling so many balls, lots of my friends started to assume that I was getting stressed. And I would say, and I still would say to anybody, even when I was being admitted to hospital repeatedly over a 7-month period, and people are talking to me about stress, it's like, I'm not stressed. I'm not stressed. But people told me that I needed to manage my stress better. So I did probably a lot of self-care that we're told to do, right? I started back at yoga classes. I was booking spa weekends and spa days. I was having some beautiful spa days with my friends. I started doing my daily breathing exercises. And yet, I still ended up in hospital twice. And the second time, burnout nearly killed me. Now, I didn't still make all of the changes after that second burnout. It wasn't until my replacement died that I then really started to make some fundamental changes and shifts in my life. But I realized at that point, you cannot stress manage your way out of burnout. And this is why coaches need to listen really, really carefully. Because if you mistake burnout for stress in your clients, you are going to keep prescribing tools that do not work. And at best, you're just going to keep frustrating your clients, right? But at worst, you are going to accelerate their collapse. So again, hands up in the chat. If you have ever been told to take a holiday or do some journaling or go for a massage or whatever, right? If you've been told to self-care or stress manage your way out of burnout, when you knew deep down it wasn't going to change anything that was happening to you, give us a wave or a thumbs up or a yes or something in the chat. Please do that again. Builders, we're going to do this as quickly as we can. Don't know how long I'll go for. Apologies if it's getting really annoying. Okay, so let's talk about these 3 critical differences, right? The stress, firstly, difference 1 is about time frame, right? Time frame. Stress is typically short term. Now, of course, yes, chronic stress is high levels of stress over a really long period of time, but stress typically is short term, right? It spikes when there's a deadline, a presentation, a conflict, when you've got builders. pulling floorboards up, right? You feel the pressure, your body responds. And when that stressor is gone, typically the system resets. Burnout is chronic, and actually it's more than chronic, but it does build over months or years in toxic environments, right? Until the body and brain can no longer reset. Burnout builds over months or years in toxic environments until the body and brain can no longer reset. But even if you were to take away the stressor, this is what I say, I talk about this a lot, right? When we're talking about return to work after burnout related absence, what lots of managers and HR professionals and leaders assume is going to happen, right? You've taken a month or 3 months off, 6 months off with burnout, and then you go back to work. And the assumption is that the stressor has now been removed and therefore you should be okay. But burnout lives within your body for a really long time. Again, right, if we think about it in terms of like nervous system being fried, we've got to rebuild. It has to be rebuilt. So stress is typically short term as a result of a stressor. Remove the stressor, the stress goes. Burnout is not the same. Builds over months or years. So I worked with a senior leader once, and they came like, I'm just stressed, right? Once I get through this project, how many times have we heard clients say that, right? Once I get through this project, once I get through to Christmas, once I do this, once I do that, right? They assume that they're going to be fine. And then this leader left the project, and this leader even left the company. But 6 months later, they were still waking up exhausted, still unable to make decisions, still totally disconnected from life. That wasn't stress. Stress would have eased once that project has ended. This was burnout because the system had been in survival mode for so long that it just didn't know how to reset anymore. So again, if you drop me a yes in the comments, if you've ever seen this, right? Someone leaves the job or the project has finished or they've got to the point that they said they were going to do, but they don't bounce back like you'd expect them to. Let me know if you've seen that. Maybe that has been you. It was definitely me. So difference one is about time frame. Stress is short-term, burnout is not. Difference number two, right, it's about this impact on identity. So again, stress is about pressure. You're overloaded, but you do still know who you are. Burnout is about a loss of self. I talked this very much about kind of like you lose your corners. For me, and for many of us, I think, that get to this point, I was always square peg in the round hole. And yet, as I began to lose my sense of self in the toxic environments that I was in, I became a very misshapen round peg in a round hole because my corners were repeatedly being kind of chipped away. So this is where I talk about my burnout equation. Toxicity minus sense of self equals burnout. It's not just about workload, it's about environments, and environments that are like so toxic that you feel like you have to mask or hide or contort yourself, right? You have to lose your corners in order to fit. And over time, that erodes your identity until you no longer recognize yourself. So again, I had one client that said to me, I don't even know what I like to eat anymore. Right. And I've had this others, right? I had one that didn't know what to eat anymore, one that didn't know what to wear. Like I stand in front of my wardrobe, like I don't even know what to put on anymore. Something as basic as food preferences or clothing had just completely disappeared. And it's because it spent years in this workplace where even like lunch breaks were dictated, but also burnout impacts not just our decision making, but at that erosion of self. It doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a slow drip of toxicity until their identity just wasn't theirs anymore. So that is why I talk about losing corners, right? Stress bends you, burnout makes you unrecognizable. So again, I suppose my question here for you, right? Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, I don't recognize myself anymore? That is the burnout effect. Again, if you recognize that, maybe just sit with that for a moment. I don't need anything in the chat, but maybe just sit with that. So difference one is about time frame. Difference two is about the impact on identity. Difference three then is about solutions. Stress responds to tools. Breathing techniques, time management, conflict resolution, right? They work when the stress is situational. Put my teeth back in for that one, right? They work because stress is situational. But burnout requires transformation. And again, you'll see this. Again, I'm seeing lots of people that are kind of regurgitating a lot of the same stuff. Right? Everybody's talking about nervous system at the moment, right? And few are actually understanding why they're talking about nervous system. But again, burnout requires transformation. We do have to start with this nervous system reset, right? This nervous system repair. And then it's about identity recovery. Then it's about leaving the toxicity. And whilst toxic workplaces are still the #1 cause of burnout globally, it's not just toxic workplaces, because we don't just have to be in the workplace in order to experience burnout. When I talk about toxicity, that can be toxic work environments, sure, toxic leaders, toxic people. It can also be toxic relationships, toxic friendships, toxic thoughts, toxic patterns, habits, behaviors. So burnout requires this transformation, right? Nervous system reset and repair, identity recovery, leaving the toxicity, and then reconnecting the mind and body. Again, I've done sessions on this in the Burnout Academy alumni about this dissociation and why we dissociate. But this is where coaches get it so wrong. Because if you give stress tools to someone at burnout, you might create a temporary illusion of progress, but you're not helping recovery. You're papering over cracks. So again, a coach once told me really proudly, right? I helped my clients set boundaries so they wouldn't burn out. And yet 6 weeks later, that client completely collapsed, like literally collapsed. Because when you're already at burnout, things like boundary setting are just too late. It's too little too late. It is, and again, this is not enough of an analogy for it, but it is like giving someone with a broken leg just a different pair of shoes. Right? The intention's good, but it doesn't heal the fracture. Tools help stress. Transformation is what heals burnout. So let's pause here for a second. I'm just really conscious of time, so I want to make sure I finish on time. So let's just pause it, but seriously, let's just pause here for a second. Right? I want you to think about your current or past clients. And I want you to think about who comes to mind when you realize that they weren't just stressed, actually they could have been on the brink of burnout. And I want you to have a think about what signs you missed at the time. And now, even just with this kind of short 30-minute session, I want you to think about how you might approach them differently now that you've been able to be a little bit more aware. So who comes to mind when you realize that they weren't just stressed? What signs did you miss? And how might you approach them differently? Okay, so here's your takeaway. I'm going to finish on time. Here's your takeaway. Stress is temporary. Burnout is chronic. Stress is pressure. Burnout is a loss of self. Stress needs tools. Burnout needs transformation. If you don't know the difference, you risk miscoaching. Nearly got that out in one turn, didn't I? But if you don't know the difference, you risk miscoaching your clients. And that is not just ineffective. For me, that is unethical. Totally unethical. So if you're listening to this and you are thinking, I need to go deeper, right? I need to make sure I never confuse stress and burnout again, then I do have something for you. You can, in fact, I was going to say, head to my website. Let me pop it in the comments for you. Not that I haven't got it ready for you. Obviously not. That would be far too simple, wouldn't I? I've lost my chat now and everything. What am I doing? I should not be allowed near tech in the mornings, I don't think. Right, I'm going to pop this in the comments for you. This is the Burnout Aware Starter Kit. Hopefully that has shared there for you. So I want you to start by downloading my Burnout Aware Starter Kit, totally free, and it will help you spot the difference between stress and burnout in your clients. And it's going to give you the foundation you need to start working ethically and effectively with your clients at burnout. So go grab that. If you think you know anybody else that needs it, share that with them. If you want to go even deeper, Burnout 101, my short online course, is also now available for you on the website. Burnout 101. It's 5 lessons. So what is burnout? What isn't burnout? How can you spot it? Talks about the neuroscience, what's going on within the brain. Why can't we just stop? You can grab Burnout 101 for £101 over on the website. But there we go. It is 10:30. I said I was going to finish exactly on the time. There we go. That is us done. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for joining, watching, getting involved. Luke, thank you very much for your comments. Have an amazing day. To anybody else that might be watching and haven't said anything in the comments, hello, good luck. If you're watching on replay, go have an amazing rest of the week. But thank you for being here. Remember, stress fades, burnout doesn't. Awareness is what makes a difference, right? Burnout is what ends awareness, and it all starts with you. I will see you again next week. Have a great one, everybody. Take care, and I'm back with you again next week. See you soon. Bye, bye, bye.